minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Launch Sequence podcast. And for today's episode, we will be talking about Star Citizen. Surprise, surprise. But I will be joined by a guest who hasn't gotten to join this year yet on the show, but we've had plenty of good talks in the past throughout the years. And he's made plenty of fantastic videos on the game throughout the years. In fact, I think your Architect Reviews videos are some of the first I obsessed over back in the day, and I know a lot of people love them. But today we're here to talk about Consequence and Star Citizen, Alpha 4.1.1, maybe some new ships, and like the big feature development that is still going on somewhere in the ether behind the scenes. Thank you for joining me for this one today, Morphologis. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm so glad to be back. I can't believe this is the first time we've talked on stream in 2025, or on any video. It feels like, it was just yesterday we did the last podcast together. So I'm glad that we're getting back together to talk in a new year.
Yeah, a lot's been happening, and
yeah, I think the last time we talked, we were like speculating what's a year going to be like, focused on content and playability, and now we're within that. We can reflect on it a little bit now, right? We can kind of like grade how things are going. So this is an interesting time to be in.
Yeah. It's so 4.1.1 is coming out sometime within the next week, and it's a pretty, I think, representative model of what's been going on this year with the game. These patches that are coming out closer to monthly, the updates that are 4 point something that used to be more about hot fixes and bug updates and bug updates instead of
bug update. No, I mean that's accurate though. Like true.
Yeah. The bug updates, the hot fixes, and maybe a little feature here or there. They're now containing, as they like to say for this update, 60 plus new missions. We're getting vehicles with each one, missions and locations and stuff. So the year's definitely different from past years. Just jumping straight into conversation, how does it feel compared to last year or other years for you?
I think it's strange. I think that there's a little bit of a lack of excitement, I think, that was present before, and I kind of saw this coming because of the lack of like these big features we know that are coming. The roadmap has been pretty empty. They've not done a very good job, I think, of setting expectations for what's happening in the near future like they used to. They used to kind of set things up the way we used to have a whole year ahead of us, right? They would show us, and now they went back to 2 months, like
Filthy
2 patches. Now
roadmap
it's 1 patch, and now
Y'all
it's
watch
not
the
like
roadmap too much. Just
yeah,
annoying.
and it's but it did set expectations a bit. It gave us something to talk about. And I would say that although there were definitely negatives about it when they didn't meet the mark, it still was like kind of exciting to know like there's this big step coming. And there's not really that feeling this year. And I think that that's kind of hurt the hype a little bit. But on the flip side of that, them focusing on content hasn't necessarily meant that there's nothing to look forward to. I think that they've done a really good job of demonstrating how content can be meaningful and exciting with the Hathor activity and the contested zones activities, and like what you earn through that and Wikello and such. Like all of these things I think are really great ways to show like, hey, this is what we can do with the existing features we have without updating new tech features. I mean, there was a little bit of confusion as well, I think, when we last talked, and understandably so. We understood, we had to kind of explain it, but just kind of reiterate. There's a difference between like tech features and content, and sometimes they get like mixed up between each other. But tech features require like the programmers to go, like the engineers to go and make something and change the code. Whereas content is more like depending on the existing code and just kind of iterating off of what we already have, which tends not to break the game as much, though it still does. They've been, and that brings me the playability part. Like I think these patches, one of the benefits of them is that they brought the game back to a more stable state. But unfortunately, I believe that tech debt was so great that they're still nowhere near bringing it to a place where I think most people outside this community would generally regard as a stable and mostly enjoyable experience.
Well, let's be honest. If the mission and transit refactors actually came out with 4.0 and did what they were meant to
Mhm.
do, I think the community sentiment would be much better throughout this first quarter.
Yeah, and
Eh,
I think this also comes down to a question of resources. So we know, and they've come out and said this, that their focus is still on Squadron. So I mean, I think
yeah.
it comes down to them just not having the resources,
You know,
and
I
it's really hurt them
I think that
in
was
a
a
way. In a way,
yeah, yeah, in some ways. But I think that was a really big statement that they put on the financial report, basically saying, "Hey, we wanted to put more towards Star Citizen, and we did, and it's not working how we like, so we're moving it back to Squadron 42 in terms of like funding." They just came out and said it, which I was kind of surprising to me, but it's in paper now. I mean, it's very clear that Star Citizen is suffering so that Squadron 42 can release. And I think that that's their ticking clock that's putting a fire under them.
yeah, and maybe we're getting too deep into this here, but I personally noticed a shift. I feel maybe this is just my disillusionment with the state of the game as of recent. We can go into why I feel that way, but because I have very specific reasons why. But it just feels like they're more focusing now on this marketing and pushing ships and such, and it feels a little bit more corporate, especially with the ISCs and the SCLs. Like they feel like I never really enjoyed having a ship advertisement be the way that they communicate information. I like
Yeah.
for that is just one example is like that's leave that for the ship sales, man. I don't want that to replace the way that you communicate with us with topics that the community is interested in, because ultimately the people who are paying the bills are the people who are still within the core community. You look at the new player growth, it's still super tiny. So what that tells us is it's still what's happening is that the existing people within the community are the ones that are spending a lot of money on funding the project. So I think it helps to just kind of keep those people happy and informed and answering really big questions that they have. And that's what I thought IC was supposed to be, but it's not anymore. It's just an advertisement.
Yeah, the
So
videos they've been doing have been pretty disappointing. The behind the ships
yeah,
videos specifically, they replace an Inside Star Citizen with a 3 to 4 minute ship commercial.
yeah,
And
it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. When
yeah,
people have questions and you're just trying to sell them another ship, you're just buying and you're just basically confirming what the most negative people in and outside of this community often say about the project. And I don't
yeah,
like having to sit here and defend that or even feel like I'm being advertised to when all I'd like to know is what's going on.
yeah. For anybody who's watching, sorry, my camera keeps going out. I've said it so many times. I don't know why we bought this camera. Unfortunately, we're stuck with it and it never works. So it'll drop off a couple times, but my voice never should. Um,
Oof.
there's a lot to kind of unpack considering the state of the game and the company. I do agree with you that things have changed, especially in their delivery. They are very focused right now, it seems, on just keeping people in the game, getting people to play Star Citizen while Squadron gets completed. And that feels a little bit reflected in the fact that they're pushing content over focusing on getting new features into the game. It feels reflected in this playability push to try and get the game to run better. It feels reflected in the advertising that you're talking about, the ship sales every month, the way they've changed their videos. Like clearly they've transitioned away from focusing on the, for lack of a better phrase or word, the imagination, right? The imagine aspect of Star Citizen. And they're now starting to try and focus more on the here's what is here right now. Enjoy it or else. And I think there are ups and bads to both of those things, but it's clearly had a change with the game, it seems, from your
Yeah.
perspective. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And it's not like it's not bad either. Like I think that the content stuff is amazing. I really, really like that they're giving us stuff to do in the game. We've always had these disconnected bits of, contents and features, but they're not connected in a meaningful way. and they're kind of working towards connecting them. You know, we're starting to see some connections happen. They're not connected yet, but like these loops with Hathor and the contested zones, when they work, are great, which they don't
So
most of the
yeah, the content itself.
time right
Uh,
now. So that's
oh,
kind of
sorry.
my one of my sticking points.
Sorry, I just lost your audio for a second there.
Yeah, it was cutting out for a minute. I think it froze for me as well.
No, you're back. So the content that they've been making at the beginning of the year, I think a lot of people were a little worried about this idea that they would be focusing more on delivering content and fixes as opposed to features because it was hard to know what content meant for CIG. There
Yeah,
haven't been that many deliveries that were that impressive before. Do you think that the community sentiment has changed surrounding that? Maybe not completely, but has the idea surrounding what a content or playability focused year means changed over the last few months, you think?
I think the concern has shifted. Um, it because what's happened is that as you make things work a little bit better and give people more things to do, you realize what other things are what critical things are missing. And I think we're seeing people now start to point out these issues, these critical missing things, and they're talking more about that than they're concerned with whether or not, you know, the content is what they were expecting. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. And there's definitely some people in the industrial or like people not who are non-combat focused who want to see more non-combat focused content, and I think that's a really excellent uh excellent point. I think there definitely needs to be more of that. But aside from that, I mean, I think people are pretty happy with the content. It's everything's surprised a lot of people what content means, like a freaking alien and a mission giver. Uh, and the script stuff and the you know it's pretty it's a good collection of things to give us things to do. um it's just it's just that now there's still things that are kind of in need of improvement, you know, like ship balancing and common issues that still often happen with cargo lifts and long standing bugs that break your gameplay completely.
Yeah,
So
freaking elevators.
elevators
Ugh.
always been a constant bane, and like physics issues, performance issues, like those types of things, the stuff that we've always been talking about, but now I think it's just much more highlighted because it's kind of the only thing standing in the way, and there's a lot of these things standing in the way from a truly enjoyable experience that whenever you sit down to play Star Citizen, you feel like your time is respected and you're enjoying it. There are
Yeah.
moments when that can happen right now, but because of the bugs, I mean, it's honestly just those that are stopping that from happening. I would be enjoying going between Hathor and the contested zones, like on my streams, if they worked, but they don't most of the time. So, that's kind of the issue in my mind anyway.
Yeah, no, I
Speaking from my own
think,
personal perspective.
I mean, there are, as you said, plenty of complaints about not enough content in certain areas, but I think most people would say if things just worked, and they've said this is their whole thing. This is what Chris said
Hmm.
about this year. If things worked, the game would be a lot better, and we could see that getting there. It's certainly moving in that direction from physics fixes to just more balanced missions and payouts
Yeah,
to
but
mission givers. But there's still things like the elevators, the trains, even just like little inventory problems. And one of the big things, I think, persistence. People, as much as they've talked about wanting to get rid of wipes and all this stuff, people still go into updates and they're like, do I need to like store my ships? How do I make sure my components don't disappear? That ain't fun. And
no, and
that doesn't
I've lost stuff too, and it's really I had like that cool Xeno threat Mantis helmet with the like the logo painted on the helm that was a heavy.
Mhm.
It's disappeared from my inventory, and I'm really upset about that because that was a cool helmet. And even actually the armor from the big bad. I had like the big bad's full set of armor, and it disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah, so
So it's
there
still happening.
that wipes out progression. And for the longest time, Star Citizen has been, I know there's like so much controversy around calling it a tech demo, but like, let's be honest, guys, it has been. If you can't continue to progress and your stuff gets wiped and the features aren't really all that connected together, which aren't my words. That's Rich Tyrer saying that. Like they have
Yeah.
said this stuff themselves. Their features were living on islands. That is the nature of a tech demo. And so there were reasons that people who wanted to play a space game and were looking for a good space experience would try it for a bit and then they'd sign off. And maybe you'd come back for a couple weeks every patch, but generally people still treated it like it was like this in a vacuum experience that you were just jumping in to either play for fun or experiment with. And I think people really want to feel like they're actually progressing and going along with this game and building a legacy and like have something to show for it. And I do think that these little bits of persistence that aren't working are doing a lot more damage than like they're doing an outsized amount of damage to the player base.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do want to go back to what you said about Chris's letter from the chairman, where he said that if the game just worked, I think people would enjoy it. I actually think that that was a bit, as somebody who plays the game a lot intimately, I didn't agree with that. I think now it's more closer to that being the case. But back then, if all we had were missions to play perfectly, there weren't that many missions to play. We were all going to the same bunkers or the same outposts over and over again. There's only so many times you can do that before it starts to become too repetitive and disinteresting to play. I think the bugs kind of stand in the way, so it draws out the experience, and you kind of, you don't see that lack of things because of all of the stuff in the way. But once that stuff in the way gets cleared out, you kind of see that, yeah, these things aren't connected. It's much more clear that these things are islands of content and features. But they are slowly working towards getting them connected. And I think, like I said, the activities are one thing that creates a loop with different types of gameplay experiences. That's fun and interesting to keep coming. It's not like a full loop yet. It's not like where you don't have crafting, which I think really starts to complete the loop in base building. Like all that stuff. That's the full loop, I think, because that's that end game content to work towards. We still need that. I mean, Wicklow is kind of that way, but it's artificial. I feel like the amount of stuff you need for Wicklow is kind of crazy, which is causing people to do exploity crap, which I don't like.
I'm it's kind of funny that I kept looking at content releases as this sort of different type of thing where features when they get released, especially in the 3.x cycle of things, they would be released and you would look at that initial release, but if you knew Star Citizen, you would be like, okay, it's coming out in that patch. Hopefully we're seeing the benefits of this within the next like few quarters, because they would release something, but it wouldn't really latch into the game that much. I think the multi-tool is like a really good example of that. They released it and it was useful for Xenothreat when they did release it, but over the time after that, you saw the way it was adding to the game and it changes the game. And now we couldn't play the game without a tractor beam. But it wasn't like that
I mean,
when we first got it. And
there's so many features like that in Star Citizen when they add in.
Yeah.
It's like this thing's like, this is going to enable so much fun. It's like server meshing, right? Like, here, server meshing's working, but by the way, the mission stuff isn't ready yet, so it doesn't take advantage of it. So there's no missions. It's that
Exactly.
sort of thing. Like it's
And
always been that kind of thing with CIG. Tier 0 is always, it doesn't really have any impact initially.
yeah. And so I was thinking that wouldn't happen with content. And it's not the same with content, but I see Wicklow added, and the first thing I thought was like, oh, this is going to be really good in like 3 to 6 quarters. Like it's good now because it adds something for people to do, especially with the favors and all that stuff. But obviously they need to tighten it down. They got to like figure out what the actual value of all these things is and how hard it actually is to find them and whether or not they should be assigning that for like such low level collection missions. But I think Wicklow is going to be Wicklow, or the gameplay that comes from him, the collection mission stuff. It's going to be like some of the best stuff in this game over time.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things that builds the foundation of progression. Like you can imagine Wicklow's like a really unique and unusual mission giver, but like a specific mission giver for a bounty hunting guild or like an industrial guild. And then it's just basically like Wicklow, but instead of giving you random things, they give you something specific to your profession. Like you get a cool set of armor for bounty hunting if you
Yeah.
work for the bounty hunting guild.
Yeah.
Like it's like the framework is there and they could do it it just takes now time and money on their part to make it happen. So I think Wicklow is great, and it's also Wicklow. It's that character, that framework itself is a great foundation to build on, because as we've seen in 4.11, they're already adding new rewards to him. They can do that every patch. Like Wicklow's got some new rewards, so now you can work towards that as well. I mean, it's such a great framework on which to keep people interested in playing, and I think it's a great way to leverage, um, fewer resources for longer mileage. Extending their gas mileage until they eventually run out before they need to start making real progress again, because all their resources are in Squadron.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really helps that narrative isn't tied up anymore to be able to do all this stuff. I I am I'm hoping that, well, what it seems like they're going to do is these mission givers, well, actually I guess I'll just say I hope that when they have all these mission givers doing their stuff and giving out the rewards like you said, um they also allow us to like really hit some optional objectives, or maybe just like performance bonuses where we get this script that they've introduced. Just looking at the cargo hauling missions, and they pay you based on how well the cargo has done. But wouldn't it be nice if you did it a little bit faster or a little more efficiently? They give you some script on the side as like a bonus. I feel like there's just a lot of opportunity for them to
Yeah,
really dive into this parallel progression they're setting up.
there's a lot of cool iteration that they could do with this. I mean, it's a great start. So I think there's a lot of positives this year to look at so far, despite there being still negatives.
Hmm.
Um, it's a good balance. I think it's overall more positive than negative. I'm so happy with the stuff that they've added in so far, and I'm looking forward to see what else they do with it, and what other further activities, especially. Oh, and the storyline too is, I mean, it's starting to become more evident within the world. We're starting to see NPCs have voice lines as
Yeah.
that connects with this story. So it's starting to feel like a living and breathing world. And I don't know if you noticed that they keep adding more and more NPCs into the environments to make them feel more lived in, especially around the med bays right now, where they're complaining and such. It feels like there's a crisis going on a little bit. Not
Yeah.
It's still a little bit disconnected from the players, but they're doing
Yeah.
a good job of like starting to get the things that they've talked about on the website about lore into the game where we can see it.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it. It's
I've
starting
been
to feel like a game and a universe.
I've been complaining a long time about that, so I do got to give them props for that. It is funny to watch these NPCs kind of talk to each other, but not be on time. So, like, one person will be sitting around, they'll be like, "What are you doing?" Excuse me. The other person will just be like, "Yeah, I've never been back to that spot." You're
Yeah,
like, "Okay,
yeah. There's some
get
server
there."
performance issues, I think, that they've got to work through for some of that. I've heard them, in times I've heard them speak really like fluently back and forth. I think it just depends on like a bunch of different performance factors. But yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah,
not perfect. It still needs work, but it's better.
it
It's they're
happens. Yeah.
they're getting somewhere.
So there is like progress there for sure, and I do think we're only 5 months into the year, and we all know CIG. That really means like 3 months into the year, because January, just we don't really know what happens in January, but it seems like they're kind of just planning and figuring things out for the year. So if we're looking at the year, this is the less active half of the year. If they keep this momentum up, do you think that it's going to be that traditional second half of the year is speeding up and getting more features and stuff? And if so, how do you think the game's going to look by the end of the year?
You know, um, I think we're going to be in a good spot. They didn't say they weren't going to do any features this year, so I think we're still building towards significant features. Because if you notice that, a little bit of tinfoil hat here, 411 is pretty rich in content for a 411 patch, like for a dot
Yeah.
patch. Um, so it makes you wonder what they're saving for that official 4.2. They've put less features in a patch and called it a full dot patch than we have in 4.11. So they're so uneven with that, but it does make me feel like they've got some cool features that they're planning to add in that are gonna put see how it's gonna step the game forward a little bit. So I know hopefully by the end of the year, what I hope to see is like, first of all, a more playable experience where 90-80% of the time the content they have in the game works. I feel like that is like a super basic baseline, you know. The
Yeah,
bar is pretty
bare
low on
minimum.
that one, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's not something that they've ever met before. So if they can get to that, I think that's a great place to be in, and they kind of need to be there because you know if they're releasing Squadron and people coming from Squadron to Star Citizen, you want that experience to be pretty okay, pretty good, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, they'll earn more money that way if they do it that way. It's
Can't
to
just be
their own
falling through the
benefit.
floor after playing through a whole
Yeah,
game
yeah.
like
It
that.
can't just be falling through the floor. But you know, I also hope to see that by the end of the year we gotten another planetary system like Nyx and you know crafting. You know, something significant by the end of the year. I think that we're going towards it too. You know, tinfoil hat. I think they're on that trajectory, especially because they no longer have to devote a ton of resources to doing a citizen con. And I know that leading up to SitCon for like 2 or 3 months, a lot of the really important teams, like the leads, are working on their presentations, and sometimes they're doing mock-ups, which don't necessarily translate into actual work that they use. So those hours aren't necessarily beneficial to the game just yet. I mean, it's a mock-up, but it's not something that they're gonna be able to like immediately put into the game. So
Yeah.
I hope what that means is like they're gonna keep this momentum going up all the way up to the end of the year, and we'll get some big crescendo. Um, you know, send off before it rolls into 2026.
Yeah.
So
I'm
I feel positive. I feel positive about the year. I'm just a little, you know, because of the current state of things, I'm just a little bummed. That's all.
Yeah, that's fair. I know over previous years you felt a little unsure about the direction of development and kind of whether or not they were. We've talked at the beginnings specifically of I think the last 2 or 3 years, and multiple times I think you were saying like, yeah, they're adding things. Yeah, there's going to be stuff coming up this year, but the true progress that leads to this becoming a real game people can enjoy is what you were looking for, and you felt like you weren't getting it as much. Are you feeling different about that now?
I'm feeling a little different. I think content was one of the things that was really missing. Um, and I think since the last Citizen Con, they actually have a plan for 1.0. It's changed the equation a bit because it feels like what they're doing is working towards that goal. If it's maybe just feels still a little bit slow, if
Hmm.
anything. So yeah, I think I felt a little bit more positive. I think having that vision is really important, like a clear idea of where you need to go. And
Okay.
5 systems feels far more attainable than 100. Like we gotta go back to that you
Yeah.
know, if you think about it, they would have had to put out 3 systems per quarter for the next 10 years to get 100, and that's just like they're not barely putting out one in many years.
I'm glad they finally
So
put
that
out a very specific statement about that. It was needed.
yeah, yeah. And then so like that's why I kind of hope as well that we'll see Knicks by the end of the year because, you know, I think that's a good pace to be at, you know, a system a year for getting to 1.0.
That would be cool. That would be cool as
It would
long
be
as
very
Nyx
cool.
came in with, if Nyx did drop into the game, I don't want to see it drop like Pyro did. I
Yeah,
Pyro
me neither. Neither.
has a lot of stuff in it, but like it's just been so broken, and even
And
even then,
it's a little
well,
underutilized too, isn't it?
yeah.
Because if you look around Pyro 5, there's a number of moons that don't even have points of interest on them. Like all you can do is land on them or mine
There's
them. You know, it
also
just feels a little under leveraged.
there's also a distinct lack, I think, of reputation usage, and that goes across the whole game.
Yeah.
But in Pyro, it obviously it stands out a lot more. And this is a topic, folks, we're gonna get into a little bit
This is a
here.
big topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we both have strong feelings about this one. So you go ahead, you know, let us segue now into this topic. What did you want us to talk about specifically to start off with on this?
I,
Because
I've
there's been
I've
some news
spent
recently.
I have definitely spent a healthy amount of time over the last week or two talking about this, so I don't think I have to explain myself too much again to folks who might be watching in here. But specifically with Pyro, um, I think one of the big lead ups to the release, or not release, but improvement to Reputation, it got released. We used it a bit. The team who was working on it couldn't work on it anymore. It got moved to the mission team. You guys know mission team. I don't actually know. Elliot's on the mission team. I think Nick might be on the mission. I mean, he's on the economy team. I don't know. But the mission team ended up getting the reputation system at some point. I think a few years ago, we saw a little more work into it, but then there was this big lead up of not very much movement as we got close to the
Mhm.
launch of Pyro, this system that's lawless, but depends on the gangs there, the gangs that you would team up with or that you might need to watch out for because they're fighting over the space stations and all this stuff. And so we lead up to this launch of Pyro when they've actually talked about reputation, I think, too, in their own ISCs. And I don't think it was working. There was no hostility, if I'm not mistaken, at least in 4.0. It might have been, but I think it might have been kind of glitchy. It eventually started working, but it worked very finicky. You couldn't, it was hard to tell who you had reputation with, whether or not sometimes these missions would send you to the wrong outpost. So now you're killing the people who are on your team, and that lowers your reputation. And then there's only two gangs out of all of these groups in Pyro that have
What they
reputations. So
talked
it's
about,
just like
yeah.
the focus on it for Pyro, which at the end of the day, Pyro is just Stanton with less security if there's no reputation play.
Red
So
Stanton, yeah.
yeah, so it really took, I think, some of the bite out of what Pyro is. And when I'm looking at the next star systems that come in, at some point they will be all content. But these early systems are obviously getting tied to feature development and they're trying to advertise these features along with these systems. I don't want to see them being like, oh yeah, Nyx has a nebula and it's got all these curious locations that you can scan and find cool things in this nebula because we've got all these signatures and stuff that we've been working with, and then it comes in and like the signatures still aren't working correctly or the scanning hasn't been updated, or then they're like saying, oh yeah, the Vandal raids are going to be really cool in this system because it's right on the edge of the system. I'm cool with them saying that as like a lore bit and then telling us it'll be a far ways out, but if they start advertising that leading up to Nyx and then it's not in Nyx, I'm going to be like, guys, you can't like give us the system or hold off on it.
Yeah.
But that's
I think that
that's
that's
that wasn't
you know,
sorry,
I
that wasn't even
I
getting into reputation.
I feel like I'm 100% with you on that. Like it definitely Pyro felt and still feels a bit undercooked. In terms of like the visual experience, it's always been good for Star Citizen, but that like underlying framework that makes it a video game has always been lacking. And I was so disappointed to learn how gutted 4.0 was actually on. I made a whole video about it. And one of the things that I was so upset that was missing the most was reputation, because it was supposed to be the big change, like the big difference between it and Stanton is that, like, depending on who you were friends with and who you're, not so good with, they would treat you differently, and you'd not be able to access certain parts of the station, and certain stations would shoot at you, and it would affect the way that you were able to get fuel and trade and make money. And like, there's some pretty interesting ideas, and then it didn't at all feel too unattainable. But then when it launched, it was just like, reputation is just this nebulous thing that doesn't even really seem to matter that much. And like they don't even defend you. Like if you get shot in some of these outposts and you're friends with Citizens for Prosperity, they don't shoot at the guy shooting at you. They just kind of sit there and watch. Like
Yeah.
that kind of thing is it's so sad compared to what they were talking about. So yeah, 100%. They need to, I think one of the things I'd like to see then kind of revise my previous thing is like, I'd like to see them get to that place where they said they wanted it to be, and then also make sure that Nyx is it feels different and cool enough that it feels like a different system. It's not blue Stanton.
Is it? Yeah, I guess Stanton is green, that one's blue. Yeah, consequence in Star Citizen in general is, well, I mean, you talk about getting shot at by a character because you shot someone else. To be quite honest, the the complications surrounding that sort of situation were always interesting to me. Back when they were releasing the distribution centers, remember those? They
Yeah.
were they were talking about how they'd be owned by different factions, and you would get sent in there, and you might come across two factions fighting each other. And I was thinking to myself, well, if I'm coming across two factions fighting each other, and they both have a different level of reputation for me, But then the opposite reputation for the person that I came on the mission with, if I share that mission, how does all of the reputation balance out and how do they react to us? And it still doesn't feel like they've answered that question. I don't think that kind of situation really comes up. They don't factor in the reputation of the people you're with. I mean, a little bit, like
Well,
whether
they
you
did
can share
say,
the mission.
I thought there was a recent thing that they responded to where they said that they do want to give everybody reputation and money uh, more evenly, as opposed to splitting it to promote people working together. So I think they're aware
Yeah.
of it, but
Well,
it's not been implemented clearly. So
well, my problem is if you take, say, the enemy of North Rock on a mission that has a
mhm.
North Rock on it, will they shoot you or just your friend? And if
Yeah.
they shoot your friend because you two are associated with, like, you two are associated with the other faction that you're actually working against, that North Rock was
Mhm.
attacking, would they attack North Rock? I Because if they're
I
friends
mean,
with your friend, would they attack you?
we're talking about a pretty niche scenario, and I feel like you
Yeah.
might want to do. They might have to go with the guilty by association route. So, like,
Yeah.
if you're in a group with somebody who's hostile, like they just assume that you're hostile because you're working with somebody that's not good with them. And I
So
think
there's
that'd
no
be a fair
sneaking
way
in.
to do it. It makes it cleaner, right? And then you couldn't game the system by having somebody in your group be friendly, or like you have an alt that's friendly with
hmm
that faction, so you can sneak in and steal stuff. That feels like it's a cheesy way of dealing with it. So um, I'd be cool with that. What I think is just the consequences itself are the things that they need to get into the game. There needs to be consequences to having bad reputation with these factions, and not just something like, oh, it's negative, I don't get missions. So okay.
hmm Yeah. The lack of, well, I want to get shot at. Okay. Not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I don't want
I
to
want to be,
die. I just want to feel like I can't go certain places.
yeah, and what needs to be, it needs to be like obvious to the player. It can't just be on a spreadsheet. It has to be like, you've flown into our space, you get a message, like, hey, we detect you on our comms. What are you doing here? Get out before
Yeah.
we're gonna hunt you down, or something like that, right? And like you try to land, well, you're not welcome here, and they just start shooting at you. Like, and if you get real bad on their side, they start sending hunter killer squads after you. Um, I think Outlaws is a pretty basic system, Star Wars Outlaws, and
hmm
that system's more advanced than Star Citizen, and it works pretty well. It doesn't need to actually be that complex, but it makes it interesting to like have to balance these different faction reputation and the benefits and drawbacks. And that's just a single player game. It's much more interesting when it's a multiplayer game and there are like other people involved.
Yeah.
So
That's why I'm
and
so
also
excited
like
about it.
the faction associations that they'd showed, like it was in the game a little bit, and I think, I'm not sure if it's still there, but you could see for some time that their player, under a player's name, their faction affiliation, but it said no affiliation. It's like it wasn't working, it wasn't connected. I
hmm
think that's a cool idea too, is like reputation with a faction is kind of your identity. It's like, who do you support? There's another disappointing thing about like the whole storyline thing with the Citizens for Prosperity and the Frontier Fighters and the Headhunters, is like, sure, you've got this like reputation you're getting on the spreadsheet with them, but it doesn't really define your identity visually just yet. Like, you're not you don't show up when you scan somebody is like, this person's a frontier fighter, they supported the bad guys, like they're not good.
Yeah.
We don't have that. So, and that creates consequences too, is like, now there are players and NPCs on both sides fighting each other, and there's a little bit of like that, team fighting, which is kind of fun, that I can imagine being exciting. So
That's what I want to see. And
yeah.
it over the last couple weeks they announced, I think, honestly, they've done this a couple times over the last year now, and I'm
Mhm.
wondering why this keeps happening, but they just announced like a pretty significant change to a system in the game, sort of offhand in a Star Citizen Live. And then there's no fault. Like they did this with bed logging last year. It was around the same time when it was just people were like, "So what's going on with bed logging?" And they were like, "Yeah, we don't know what this is all about. We want people to be able to log out and log in anywhere in the game." And it was just like, "Wait, what? That's That's a big change. And then it was nothing after that. And they kind of did the same thing with Reputation again recently.
Yeah, I heard about this, but you want to set up what happened, kind of
s-
refresh people's memories.
yeah, so it has to do with what you were saying there. You might do something to get bad reputation, but there's not good messaging that you've done that. So when you're going into land at a place that's hostile to you, they're not messaging you and telling you to back away. There just might be a little pop up on the screen, but it doesn't say much. Um, or there might be the reputation in your menu in the mobiGlass, but you have to know that that's there to go look at it. So they said basically that they wanted to try and avoid players going out and running a mission in which they would ruin their reputation with a company like ArcCorp, only to find out then that once they go back to other places associated with ArcCorp, they're getting shot at or having problems. Um, and so they also, I think, seemed to explain that technically it was just going to be too complicated for everybody to have reputation as well. So they're getting rid of local reputations and moving more towards applying it to guilds and factions that span across all the star systems and are a little bit more limited in number. I don't think this is too big a deal for most people, but I do think this for folks like myself who are really interested in how localized consequences would be, how the spaces you could go and the people you could associate with would guide your journey through this game and define what you actually were able to do. I do think this is something that limits the game quite a bit going forward. But
Yeah,
what do you think?
though, here's the thing: they have said that we're never going to do this thing, or this thing is impossible before, and later they just changed. They did a 180. Like for example, the space stations. I remember them saying we're never going to do space stations. Player space stations, never going to happen. And I said, I remember saying this, like, it'd be cool, player built space stations, because it could be a cool end game. And guess what? Not because of me. It's because it's just a cool idea, like space game. Why not?
Morph
Space
changed the
stations.
game, folks.
They're like, all right, we'll do space. We'll do space stations. All right, we're
Streamers.
doing it. So I feel like even though they're saying this now, it doesn't mean that they won't change it later if they realize this isn't a good system. Because I'm with you on this. Like where I want to be able to go to a bar and say that I'm wanted in 7 systems. Like that classic Star Wars line. You can't have that if it's just across all systems. You've got this faction with the guild or whatever.
Technically,
We
you're
got to
still
have some
wanted
localized,
across 7 systems
right? Yeah, but only like it
by
should
one group.
still be like it's localized to those groups that don't like you. And I like that idea. Like there's some systems that they don't like you in, and you got to avoid, or you're going to have some trouble going through. I just think it creates some more interesting. It creates an interesting topography of gameplay space that I'm worried a flat, even plane. I'm just worried that wouldn't be. That's what you're describing. It's just this flat plane where everything's kind of the same, and I don't like that. But I also think that the issue really, in my mind, is that I thought reputation was going to be the one thing to help solve repeated offender issues with people like or player killing constantly. Like, yeah, sure. I think that there needs to be some way to resolve one player making a mistake as a newbie shooting ArcCorp representatives and then getting shot by ArcCorp. Yeah, that sucks. Let's try to fix that. But what I'm concerned about is the guy who keeps doing it over and over and over and over and over again. That there's no consequence to that guy, because once you go to prison, the slate is wiped. And the reason why this really matters is that you want people to be deterred from being griefers, from doing something for the sake of making somebody else's experience worse. And that's what I kind of hope this system would self-correct with. Because I don't know how else they're going to self-correct that other than direct hands-on moderation of banning people and warning them, which just doesn't seem like a sustainable thing when you've got a bigger and bigger player base.
Yeah.
Like it'd be better if the system itself was self-correcting or limiting in some factor.
Yeah.
So
there's also
go
ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Like in being able to see that information as a player to know like this person has got bad reputation with this one area, maybe I should trust that person is really interesting and useful. So I don't know.
Yeah, and
I think they need to clarify maybe. And like I'm worried that maybe they were too vague. Maybe they just didn't communicate what they thought they were communicating, and they didn't think it was as big of a deal.
That's what I'm
it feels
saying,
big a deal.
That's the same thing with the bed logging thing. It's in I'm like, guys, this is a big statement to just put out there and not have any sort of backing information. I mean, they did this with the character skills at CitizenCon 2023 also. No, 22 also. They were like, yeah, your character's going to be able to have skills and they can work on them so that they get better. And throughout most of this project's lifestyle, I think we were like, this is mainly based on player skill. And yes, we're going to get different types of weapons and stuff that change your like effectiveness in the game. But this was the first time they had mentioned character skills, and then it was just dead silent after that for until I think the next Citizen Con. So
Yeah.
I do think they do that. They just say things and don't realize that they actually do have a big impact, or at least theoretical impact on the game. And then we're left kind of just like, well, maybe if this means this and that means that, because they know we're going to speculate. That's all we do. That's half this game.
Yeah. I think that what this comes down to is a lack of perspective. Is like you're within, as somebody working within CIG, you're privy to a lot of information. And after a certain point of knowing a lot of information, it's hard to kind of disseminate what is information that's known and what is information that isn't. And so, like, you say something and you assume that people know what you're talking about, but they don't because they don't work at CIG. And it's not really their fault necessarily. You can't expect every developer to know what people know and what people don't know. But that's what ISC is supposed to be for, and that's also why I'm so upset that it's become a ship advertisement instead of, like, wouldn't it have been great to have another follow up, even a couple weeks later for account for the lag time of planning for these episodes, because I know they take a lot of planning and editing. To be like, all right, let's do an episode where at least part of it we address this question. Let's answer some of the most popular questions from the community about what direction are we doing now for reputation and what does this mean for consequences. All right, and then people are, they're still going to have more questions. You're not going to please everybody, but like radio silent after that.
Yeah.
Okay, now everyone's freaking out. Nobody knows what's going on. There's tons of speculation.
Yeah.
So,
And
but who knows? I mean, their funding is off the charts this year, so maybe they just don't care and they don't have to care.
yeah,
Which feels a little bad.
they're seeing some good success. Maybe not exponential growth at this point, but certainly doing
but
well
exponential money.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me with this is the motivation. On one hand, I understand technical limitations, and I understand if they have to pull back for that, and I think that makes sense. I'm willing to hear that out. I'm willing to see where they go with that to make that system work. You can work around something like that, but the other thing they said was the reason for this was more philosophical than this is what the game can and can't do. That's them saying,
Yeah, that's what I read it as too, because they were the lore guys. They weren't the game developers, the people who were programming, the engineers. If I remember correctly, the guy who came up was, sorry, he's been with the company since the beginning, and I should know his name.
Dave Haddock.
But Dave Haddock, yeah.
And,
I'm so sorry, Dave Haddock.
Nathan.
He's the lore guy, and he's not necessarily the engineer. I'm sure he's knowledgeable. He's an experienced game developer, but ultimately he's leading that philosophical part, right? So we don't really know what's possible or what's not. Maybe he does, but I think you're right. I think it's a more of a philosophical issue, but as players of the game, I think we have a different perspective, and that's what these types of podcasts are great for, is to say, I get what you're saying, but I don't agree in some ways because there's this, and this issue. So,
well, if they were to take away Crusader security and replace them with Foxwell, which is what they've done now, what my concern is that if a player still goes out and takes a mission for security and they accidentally shoot a Foxwell security person instead of a Crusader security person, when they go back to Crusader, does that mean that Crusader doesn't react to that? Because the whole problem here is that there's no consequence for shooting the wrong people. And rather than saying we're going to fix their ability to identify the wrong people, we're going to take away the consequence. And so I'm wondering, is there not going to be security in Crusader that does stop you and say, hey, you killed a person? That could be crime stat focused. Like there's the crime stat system and there's the reputation system. Crime stats, I would assume, are for things you've done right then, and reputation for how people respond. But
See,
if
I'm
you're lowering,
confused because that just seems like such an inferior way to do things because they've done so much to make things like cool Hurston security armor and Hurston security. Like, and the idea of this dystopian private military is also like classic sci-fi. So if you're just throwing that out the window for one size fits all security, it just feels such like a downgrade, really. If what you're saying is their idea of their direction, that sounds bad.
yeah.
Personally, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the alternative would be they keep Crusader security, but Crusader security has no reputation, so they don't respond to your reputation, but maybe they still respond to your crime stat. But in that case, if you shot someone and you got that crime stat, which was the situation that caused this debate that they said, you would still have a crime stat and end up not being able to use services. So I just don't when you say that the reason is to avoid players getting in trouble for what they've done, I'm like, okay, well, where do we go from there?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if some of this is also them pulling back from the more sim hardcore aspects of Star Citizen, because I do worry that there's a little bit of a softening to that, especially with say for example the item recovery system and the walking back death of a spaceman in a way, like the consequence to death. It kind of feels in the same vein, doesn't it? Maybe we're just drawing, or maybe I'm just drawing connections that aren't there, and this is not related, and that's not what they're doing. But it just
Well,
sometimes it does feel that way a little bit. So
a lot of players hate these things. And I don't know if they're players who have followed Star Citizen for a long time and known that they were coming and just not really wanted to talk about it, or if they're players that are newer and see where Star Citizen wanted to go and are unhappy about it. But you look at physicalizing cargo, you look at the possibility of losing a character after dying 10 times, you look at um,
mhm.
even being somewhat limited from piloting big ships as a solo player, and almost each one of those topics pushback on pushback and all on all mediums. I mean, if I'm seeing it across everything that I do, CIG is seeing it nonstop. People don't want these deeper aspects into the game that can lead to consequence or make the game take longer, and it's because it feels tedious. At which point you say, okay, well, maybe find a way to continue to build depth into this gameplay without doing that. But most people just say, no, take it out. Just let me do this more easily. And I think we are kind of seeing that happen in some parts of the game over time. I don't think you're
you know,
just
I
connecting dots.
I worry that they're reacting too soon and not trying this system out. Maybe that creates too much issue with resources. But like going back to Star Wars Outlaws, which is a really simple system, the effect it has is like you do a quest for one faction and you lose rep with the other one, and now you've got a reason to go and try to get your rep back with the other faction. Because they offer different contracts. Some contracts are against other factions, whereas others are more neutral contracts where you just gain reputation as a net positive with that faction. So it kind of creates this constant balancing that you do and this weighing about who do I screw over and who do I not. And I like that dynamic. I think it's interesting, especially when you're dealing with more outlaw type factions, like in the pirate system.
Hmm.
To remove that type of potential to gameplay seems like is a huge potential loss. There's a lot of potential there. I mean, I'm not saying that Outlaws does it perfect. I mean, there's definitely issues. It's a single player game. There's so much more they could do with it, I think, with Star Citizen. So yeah, I don't know. All of this feels a really a little bit quick, a little bit short sighted. And that's just my perception of it. Like maybe they do have this big plan and it all makes sense to them, but it certainly doesn't make sense to me from what I've heard.
I want to ask, when you think of like consequences in game, and I'm talking about things like health bars, ammo limits, stamina systems, the kind of stuff that happens to you, but the developers didn't put it in the game so that you're having fun, but it does change the way you play the game. Do you think those kinds of aspects have grown more in gaming or have shrinking away more?
I would say that there's less experimentation and less complexity in games nowadays with systems because there are formulas that big corporations have found to make money, and they just keep repeating the same formula over and over again. And just to infinity. And it's I would say we're seeing a shift away from more interesting systems. To be honest, uh, it's only from like indie games that we start to see really really cool stuff happen. So anyway, that's my read on it. I'm not sure if that helps. Really,
Well,
I think
what do
CIG
you
is still within the indie space, and they should still try to experiment with things.
how do you feel about these kinds of aspects in a game? Like, are you the kind of person who likes to go more for like the Dark Souls, difficult to play, or are you looking for something that's just like easy to go through over and over and just have a good time?
Well, if you make it too easy, then it kind of hurts its longevity. I think one of the exciting things from my perspective that drew me into Star Citizen is just like the idea that that Chris wanted to do so much to make such a great complex and interesting system into a game, like a living and breathing universe. And if you take that away, I don't think it's I think they kind of take away what's good about the game. To draw a parallel, it's kind of like what Battlefield did with 2042 is they took away the class system and they made it a hero shooter. But if you like, they lost the plot. If people want to play hero shooters, they're going to go play a hero shooter. They're not going to play Battlefield.
Yeah.
They lost their soul, and they realized that because they're going back to it now in the next version of Battlefield. I mean,
Thank
this
God.
isn't just speculation. They know it, and everyone was like Battlefield fans were saying this too at the time. Is like, this doesn't feel like Battlefield. So if you strip that away and you try to go with the norms and you try to be like everybody else, I think that you put you might make a quick buck initially, but you're gonna suffer, I think, in the long run. So
But
um
you mentioned Battlefield fans telling DICE this isn't Battlefield. Who are Star Citizen fans though? Like who
right,
would CIG even listen to?
well, no,
Because
my
it's
my
just
my point
so
is
crazy.
is if you try to my point is not to listen. It's not about the fans. It's about that, trying to be like everybody else, trying to make it a more simple experience, or a more cookie cutter one that fits with the wider norms of what everybody else is doing. I don't think CIG is like doing that. I mean, they're pretty well into the area of holy crap, nobody else is going to do this because it's
Yeah.
too insane.
Yeah.
But I just worry, like, I don't want them to if there's any temptation to do it, I would say stop it, because the reason why people are here is because you're not like everybody else. And that's what's so great about Star Citizen. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt because it takes so damn long. And sometimes it's just baffling of the decisions that they make. But ultimately, like, still around because they're doing things that nobody else is trying to do. Nobody else has the budget to do, or you know, like, they actually have creative people there who love what they're doing and that aren't restricted by people in suits saying, no, we've got to do what we did in the last 20 games we made of the exact same kind. So
Yeah.
that's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
stick
I
to your
get you.
guns. Stick to your guns. You guys are, it's just that things are taking a while. That's the issue. And
Yeah.
you're split your focus between two games, and that's the biggest issue. So we don't see the progress in Squadron. I think this is ultimately, it all comes back to Squadron, really. It's all Squadron. Get
Yeah.
Squadron out the door.
Squadron all the way down. That's I think
Yeah.
my biggest fear at the moment is um them proving that they can do the technological hurdles was big, but there's also this underlying worry that like it is taking too long, and not from the sense that, oh, I'm sick of waiting, it's too long. No, like from the sense that they can continue to fund this development. I don't want to see them start not running out of money that they're going to close down or fail or bankrupt or anything like that, but running out of money to where they have to start doing really what most traditional game companies do, and that is stripping out or toning down some of the things that make the game unique in order to ship something because people are getting antsy. And luckily, I don't think the
Yeah.
thing they need to ship is Star Citizen. I think that the thing they need to ship, like you said, is Squadron 42, which doesn't depend on all these features as much. But at the same time, they're dragging Star Citizen along to make it more stable so that it can fit Squadron. And that means maybe at least in the short run, scaling things a little black.
Yeah, I think that's what that means.
So
Sorry.
the next big consequence then that's coming into the game, which is, I think, like a lot of these things that we've been talking about, is engineering. And there's a lot to say about engineering. I think we've learned a little bit more about it on the monthly report, which is nice, but it's still not around. And I saw this interesting comment on one of the videos yesterday, and they said, "Who's excited for this? It sounds like more chores. Take as long as you need, CIG." And it's funny to look at these comments because I do think that engineering is a powerful thing. It allows us to repair. It allows things to last longer. The power systems work. Everything makes more logical sense. But at the same time, I also understand people are like, "Oh, it's more chores." What I don't understand is how people don't look at this and think of it as something that you are supposed to dislike at times. And I was wondering, from your perspective, do you think that, like, how often should that be a thing? Should features focus on actually deterring players as opposed to just giving them the
Well,
fun blues?
I think that the issue with it is, see, it's always complex when you're getting feedback as a developer, is to understand and try to interpret what people are saying, because sometimes the reason why people feel a certain way isn't directly obvious. And I think in this case it's exactly that kind of issue. The problem with engineering, if it were to be introduced now, isn't that engineering sucks or that they have to make it more fun in some way. It's like the surrounding systems that are the issue. It's that to put a to like to try to illustrate this. Are you aware of Sea of Thieves? Do you
Oh
know
yeah.
much about that game?
hmm
Um, let's talk about patching things and using a bucket. Are those systems like? Do you find those gameplay, if you played that as an isolated gameplay loop where all you did was patch walls and use buckets? Do you think that that's fun? Is that a fun thing to do? No, wow.
Hey
What?
man,
No.
I
The
love Power
reason why,
Wash Simulator. Okay, you better watch out for what I find fun.
well,
No,
power
I
wash, you
feel
can
you.
see progress as something's clean. I feel like that's even better. We're talking about like a super bone stock simple system. The
Yeah.
reason why that's fun isn't because the actual activity is fun.
hmm
It's because you're in a fight keeping your ship alive, and if you don't do this, you're gonna lose. You got to do this, all right, or your ship's gonna sink. You're gonna lose all your treasure. Like, it's all the surrounding systems that make that system fun. Like the frantic nature of having to patch things up while you're on the run to keep yourself afloat is exciting. Sorry, I think I'm cutting out.
Yeah, but it
Is
catches
exciting.
up.
So let's bring it back to Star Citizen. The issue with big ships is right now they suck. Like, nobody uses them in PvP.
Yeah.
You use them for like role play or like light PvE if you're not really dealing with actual combat that's gonna matter. Because they suck. So you can't. I can't see myself wanting to play right now in a hammerhead with 7 people or more because I need engineers. When 7 people in fighters can just, or actually 2 people in fighters can absolutely demolish me in like a minute with a fully crewed hammerhead. And now what you're saying is I need to go out and patch stuff all the time and maintain it, and it costs more money. Hell no, I don't want to do that. But if what you were to say instead was like, that hammerhead is so powerful, it can like take out tons of fighters, but it will be targeted, and you need to keep it like you gotta keep patching it up. Then there becomes a reason to want engineering. Is like, because it's there and it makes a difference, you want to do everything you can to keep it in the fight to make that difference. That's when engineering becomes exciting. Bring it back to the smaller ships. Like, if those smaller, if like tuning made some meaningful difference in how a ship performs, then it matters. And then like what we're doing with these ships and the value of these ships as well. That like the soft death temporary mechanic is not good enough to make us feel like a ship is valuable. Like, can't repair a ship from from death and plug new components into it. And before that happens, engineering just won't be that interesting. Like imagine finding a wreck and being able to replace the components and bring it back to functioning and then go to register it. Now engineering becomes, holy crap, I can get a cool ship out of putting effort into engineering.
But
Then it becomes like it's not just the engineering that's the problem, it's the game that connects
oh,
to
I
it
get
that's the
that.
issue.
I get that. But I'm talking about people who are specifically saying engineering as a thing. They don't want it in the game.
Well, I mean that's what I mean. I think people are saying that engineering they don't want in the game. My thinking is the reason why they feel that way is because they're imagining engineering in the current way the game is. And I would agree. Like the current way the game is, it would suck. It would just be tedious. But if the games, all the other systems made it so that engineering felt rewarding and worth it, then I think people would really like it. So I think that's really what it comes down to.
Okay.
You know, it's like it's like if we go back to Sea of Thieves, like they have the patching and bucket filling mechanics, but there's no combat. So it
Well,
just keeps happening randomly and you just have to go and do it.
well, I was gonna
Like,
say,
what
how about
I don't want to do that.
how about outside of combat scenarios? I think a lot of people are thinking about this less from the perspective of, oh, I'm attacking people and using turrets and all this stuff, and more from the perspective of, I don't want my ship to shut down or randomly malfunction on me. Why would you put that in the game?
I think that comes down to tuning. I mean, like I think people complain, or if I recall correctly, about eating and drinking, but how many people are still doing that? Like I think they've got the tuning down pretty good. I think you only have to eat and drink once a play session now. It's not every 10 minutes. And you know, like other survival games, that is obnoxious. I hate having to eat and drink every like 5 or 10 minutes in survival games. Star Citizen is not that though. Like they've gotten it kind of sorted, and I think that that's where engineering has to go with like maintenance. It needs to be like present in the background is something I might need to do to make my ship better. But and I think that that's also like one of the things they need to do with engineering is that they need to give you a like an actual benefit to it. You know, like maybe your ship, if it's in pristine condition, has you know, I don't know, maneuvers better, like its thrusters work better and you move a little faster and your weapons work a little better, your capacitors are a little bit more tidy. Like there's a benefit to you keeping it in pristine. Then you're giving people incentive to want to do it. So I think there's a lot of things I could do to make it. But that's my read on it. I think people are just looking at it and as they should, they're just gamers, they're just regular people, they don't like us sit down and think critically about all these systems. They're just saying, hey, right now Star Citizen is a little kind of frustrating sometimes, and getting people together is really time consuming, and you're going to add engineering on top of that, or got to go on like replace things. Like what the hell, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I understand people who don't want to do that. I just that's the point, you know?
but there's
Can't.
also there's like look, there's some people will never gonna I think maybe what you might be also thinking about here is that there are some people who have these really crazy out there expectations, like I want to be able to solo my ship. I don't want
Oh, well.
anybody on board my Idris or my Javelin. I'm going to solo that thing with blades. I don't want any issues with my engineering. A lot like those are like the niche crazies. No offense, but like that doesn't sound like that feels a little pay to win to me, right? Doesn't it? Like if you can just pop in and you've got no consequence to being by yourself in a Javelin, it's not the kind of game that I personally want to play. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's where they're going, and I'm completely wrong, and I'm a dick, and I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I am a dick, and I should have said that.
Dude,
But
I mean,
um,
that's part of the consequence, right? And I think I always go back to engineering is just another way to encourage you to play a certain way. And if anything, for me, it expands our abilities because like you're not gonna, if you had the choice of buying two different sports cars that you wanted to be able to enter into different races with, you're not going to buy the one that you have to take back to the manufacturer to get different parts and stuff put in. You're going to take the one that you can change out on the field, right? I'm going to want the ship that I can repair and replace my components while I'm out there in space instead of flying back to the space station every time I want to change something out. And I think that part somehow gets missed as well.
mhm. Yeah,
But at the end of the day, I mean, I hope that they could get engineering into the EPTU this year because of all things, the hardest thing for engineering is conceptualizing it, or I guess figuring out how it's going to work if we can't get our hands on. And the longer it continues to show up and we talk about it and all this stuff happens, but players can't actually try it, I think the longer the idea of what it is and the idea of what they think it is keeps getting further and further away. Because what we have in Arena Commander right now is a really bad representation of it. And that's really all people can do. Have you even tried that?
I did try it once with the C2, or is it
Yeah.
AM2?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did try it before. I mean, there's some cool ideas with it, but ultimately it's still limited. Yeah.
You tried it just once. It's just-
Yeah, I
that
tried it once and that
explains it.
was enough.
Yeah. The last thing that I think is, I guess, a little telling of the consequence situation in this game is death and how that's supposed to work. A lot of people have concerns about dying and losing their character or dying and losing their stuff. And we've seen even with item recovery recently put into the game, CIG is trying to make sure players are comfortable with the way they're playing. Do you feel like, actually, I haven't even heard your thoughts on item recovery. What do you think of that whole path?
I think it's a terrible system the way it's planned. There are potential outs for it, but ultimately what they're talking about is no consequence to really dying, because if you can just get your stuff back with insurance forever, you never really can lose anything, and if you never lose anything, there's no incentive for you to go and buy things in a player market. So why are we manufacturing things? So what does that become? Like, is crafting just so that we can craft a box to sell it to an NPC? That doesn't sound interesting at all. Like the way they showed is like we could build a base on a planet and have a shop and sell to players. Like that's way more interesting to me than like an NPC showing up and buying random shit. Like I want to sell to players. I think that's more interesting, especially when like perhaps the thing that I'm making is a little bit better stats because I had a certain formula I used to make mine better than other players, right? So I think that it really is antithetical to the whole loop that they talked about, to do it in the way that they did. They have to have a money sink in some fashion. You have to lose things eventually when you, and I think ultimately we're always going to have an issue with those things you buy on the website because you can never lose them. But I think that can be mitigated somewhat. Like I said, this is one of the things they can do to fix the system, is that those items are in terms of the tiers that they talked about, because they talked about like tier 1 through 5, that those items you get on the website are low tier items like 1, 2, that their damage output and such and their protection aren't as good as what you can find in the world. But what you can find in the world, it has a durability. Eventually, even if you try to reclaim it, it goes away or you lose it. Like you can't get it on insurance, you can't claim it on insurance. Like that's the kind of thing that still needs to happen, because otherwise you don't have this burn. You need to have this burn, the churn, like where you're losing things and you need to go out and buy it. Otherwise, there's no economy.
Yeah.
So and also like we've seen the consequence to not having any consequence to losing things. What happens now in contested zones is that you just see the same person over and over and over again, and you compound that with the fact that you can use boxes to glitch through walls reliably now. And you might have gone through an hour to get a red key card to go through the red section, and there's the same guy box glitching in with the same kit, and you cannot stop him because he just keeps coming back every 5 minutes. It doesn't matter if you're playing fair, he plays unfair and he still wins, and everyone's doing it that way. It's like the meta now. And then you've got like people spawning. If you're holding down a point right now anywhere on the ground, like specifically at Hathor, and you kill a bunch of guys, like you're an ace FPS player. This happened to me. I went out and I pulled off some of the best shots I've ever pulled off in my life with a P6 LR. I, within the span of 5 seconds, killed 4 guys, all spread out in different locations, and to protect one of my teammates. And what happened? They just spawned back in their floating Connie, which I couldn't get to or get into to stop, blow it up. And they've got the advantage. Like, there's no way for me to ever win that situation. I'm always at a disadvantage because they just keep spawning back with their ammo, with their gear. It just really sucks for that situation in its current form. And it's going to keep sucking like that in even in the future system, if they don't have some cooldown or some cost to losing things. So it's not a good system. I think it needs to be. They need to rethink it.
I think for the future system, do you think that it could just be like if you get something back from insurance, it doesn't have any of those benefits from the crafting, the additional stats or the skin or anything like that?
Yeah, that could be one way you can do it, or you can combine whatever special skin item you have with one that you find, and it gives it stats, but those stats don't transfer back. So what I mean is like it's basically like a skin, like use it like a skin. You can apply the visuals to any item you find that's been crafted, and what you
Mm,
get back from insurance claim is a basic item with your skin,
yeah.
and it's not good. If you want like the good, better meta item, you need to go and buy it again from a player.
Yeah.
That's the only way that I think you can balance that system.
And again, I feel like this is
One of
another
the only
time.
ones. I mean, there's
Well,
sorry.
but I feel like this is one of those times where they said this and we got like a little bit of an explanation of how it's supposed to work, but then that almost feels like an unspoken part of the system because it feels like so obviously like that's how it should work. Do you think there's a reason that that wasn't like that's not what they're
The
doing?
reason, okay, super cynical here. The reason why they did this is for money. I mean, they're not the moment they put this out live. Guess what they did on the website? They
Added
sold a
gear.
fancy new gear set on the website. So I know like someone in marketing was like, "Hey, we got to have this. We got to have people be able to buy this gear. It's a great, vector for earning
Well,
money." And
do
yeah,
you
you
think
still
the
just got to make
decision
money.
was
It just
do you think the decision was made and then marketing was like we could take advantage of this? Or you actually think that marketing was like we
I
need to do this and they came up with a whole
I
item
think
recovery thing?
I think that they pushed it. In my mind they pushed it, and
Okay.
and in some way you could justify it because a lot of players really liked it. There's a very positive reaction to it because there's a
Yeah.
fair. It's fair to say that it sucks when you die to a bug and lose your kit. I don't like that happening, but I feel like we've been dealing with it up till now. Can we just wait till we have a better system to reclaim this stuff instead of completely disrupting
It's the year of
all
playability
these
morph.
PvP loops? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think they could have, for example, made you drop weapons, drop weapons and ammo. So you can't just keep coming back over and over again. Like that would have been a great way to just kind of deal with the balancing of it, but they didn't. So it just makes me feel like, especially because they literally just sold a set of armor right after they did this. They were just doing it to sell that armor. It just feels a little icky, you know. I understand that they got to do this system at some point, and I support it. I don't not support it. I think you should get back items you paid for. You need to. In fact, I think you could be sued if you don't. So I just didn't like the way they're doing it.
But in the long term, though, with their final version, why do you think they didn't include that caveat of when you do get
I
your
don't.
stuff back via insurance, it's just low level? That it seems like
I
that's a
don't think
very
they.
easy solution.
I don't think they've thought about it as they've not connected all those systems yet because it's so far out.
That's crazy,
But
man. No, I can't accept that. It takes us so little time to come up with these. Like there's no way you come up with a system like this and don't think that.
because maybe I think they've got options and they're not sure which option they want to do, so they're being vague to leave themselves like a crack to squeeze through to do something different, and they do that a
Mm.
lot, and it's fair to do it that way because you tell people you're going to do one thing and then you suddenly change it, it pisses them off. So it's better not to
Yeah,
tell them what you're doing so that they won't get pissed
it's
off. I
like
mean, that's kind of why they got rid of the roadmap, right? So
that's like
that's
half
the
the
same
show.
philosophy.
We're over here
Yeah.
raging about reputation.
Yeah. Yep. It is. It is. So I think that some people at CSG would just rather us never talk about anything but how great the ships are. So
They don't want us to clip it. I see you. Yeah, I don't know. It's all very rough timing for I think I'm in the niche, to be honest. I don't know for sure, but I think as somebody who like really does want to see a lot of consequence in this game, not because I just want to keep getting beat up, but because games have gotten so open and so just trying to allow you to do anything. I want there to be reasons in the game for me to not do things, right? Like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 gets celebrated because of its immersive sim elements, because it restricts you from doing things or going certain places or being a certain type of person when you want to do certain things. And there's a ton of different games that we could point to that do stuff like that. And that's how I viewed Star Citizen, from the ship that you bought, the weapons you brought along, to the backpack you wore, to what starting space station or planet you were on. And from bed logging to the medical system with the NERSA and the respawn stuff, to the way that the flight model is changing, to engineering, to inventory recovery. I feel like a lot of the things they're doing are, for starters, trying to make the game feel a little more playable and approachable, but it feels like it's having a lot of consequences on consequences, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is one of the consequences of having being still in an alpha state. So, I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's why we talk about it. We want to like say, I mean, ultimately, I think we've done a lot of talking here about problems and see the game be as amazing as we know it can be. You know, that's what it ultimately comes down to. And I hope that people in the community, I hope that CIG, you know, can understand that these podcasts and these conversations happen because of a love for the game. And that you might not agree with every point that people make, but if people are talking about it, it means they care. It's the moment that people stop talking that you need to worry. You know, if people are indifferent, that means that they're moving on. And that's not a good thing. You want them to stick around and talk about it and debate it.
Yeah. That's why we will keep
Right.
bringing back master modes.
That's right. Yeah. Master modes.
Just keep the debate going, man.
Keep the debate going. Is it it's so slow, or it needs to be faster?
Oh boy,
No,
yeah.
I don't want to start this debate again.
All right, yeah, cool. Of course. Oh, which spaceship it's okay. Anyways, dude, thank you so much for joining me for this talk. This is a good look at, I think, 2025 as a year overall, kind of how things have been going, and the consequences in Star Citizen and how those are going. There's still so much in the air, and a lot can change. Even with the stuff we talked about today, like you said, they kind of leave themselves open for some maneuvering. Overall, I'm still incredibly, I'm happy with the general direction the game is going, the playability of it, the content being brought in, some of the things that are clearly being made for people to play the game rather than just try it out and test it. So I'm happy about that. But I hope we start hearing more about public facing news regarding future development soon. Uh, any closing thoughts from you on these topics?
I mean, I feel like I had some closing thoughts just then, but you know, overall, as always, I'm still excited for Star Citizen. Just I will always have critical thoughts about something that I like. So, I mean, it's they're going in a good direction. I feel like they're going in a good direction this year. It's a good year so far. It's not perfect. Still got a lot of issues to work out, as we discovered. A lot of things to clarify. I'd love a little bit more communication, direct communication, and addressing community issues. Not just mine, but just like, you know, everybody's got things that they want to know about on the forums, and it's always so nice to like. I love those episodes where they were like answering questions from the community that were really really good. You
Yeah.
know, it's always felt like, I'm learning something really cool here, and that feels connected and responsive. And I love those moments with Star Citizen, and I feel like that they've gotten a little bit away from that. So I'd like to see them bring that back. Um, but otherwise, you know, like, seem like they're doing a pretty good job, and their funding has shown that they're doing better than ever. I don't know.
People are like,
It's
and
pretty
yeah, people are
wild.
spending money. Yep.
Yeah, people are spending wild amount, and you know, the Edgers P is about probably to come out. You know, we didn't even talk about the new ships coming out, and they're gonna make bank in Invictus this month.
You think the Idris is coming out?
I think so. They gave us a silly Idris P T-shirt as the merch this month, and for like the subscriber gear, and they've got an Idris P parked above, and it's like completely prepared and ready on the interior. It's got its like missile bay removed, and everybody's seen it a million times. Like, there's no more shock or awe with it. So I think it's time.
That's
Like,
why
if
I'm
I were
like,
going to
okay,
release
what's the
it,
point? But
yeah, just release it.
yeah, I guess now this is the year where they need that kind of a cash influx. I don't know. I don't really care either way. I'm not that interested in it, but I recognize that people do. I made a joke about it on ISC Reaction yesterday, and like offended somebody because I didn't also acknowledge that they might be bringing it out. And I'm like, I'm not that deep into it. It might come out, it might not. I'm glad people are excited for it, but it's just another ship.
Yeah.
Just a big ship.
It's a ship that'll make them a lot of money, though.
Yeah, that is true.
Big ships make them tons of
That
money.
is
Yeah.
true. I look forward to seeing all of the solo Idrises flying around ripe for the stealing. I might actually become a
Like-
pirate for a little bit if that's
Oh, for sure. It'll
All
be
right,
fun.
man.
You can shoot up the front door and like land inside the bay and
Yeah.
try to get to the. Yeah, that'll be
free
fun.
Idris. Freaking sick. That's a lot of cargo space. Hey, dude, you want to let them know where they can find your own content, videos, streams, all that jazz?
If you look hard enough, you can find it on YouTube and sometimes on Twitch, also on other platforms. But those are the primary places I do stuff on. So yeah, look for me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me for this episode, folks. Hope you enjoyed this. Obviously, there was a lot of like critical talk and talk of things that we aren't happy about. Don't worry, that doesn't mean the whole podcast is changing. We just like to, we mix it up. Also, I think most of the podcasts have some critical. Every time we ever have a talk where like we talk about things we want to change people or panic, it's fine, guys.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, don't worry. We have no sway. Nobody, no one cares what we say anyway. We're just talking into the ether.
That A2 nerf, when that A2 nerf comes, I know it's from you. I know you're the reason it's happening.
Oh man, you took the last. I'm cutting out. That was gonna be my last line right before you shut off, but I'll say it anyway. Nerf the A2. All right.
There we go. All right, folks.
I need to get a T-shirt. I need to wear it all the time.
You do. You need
I should make it. It should be one of my merch. Yeah, I got to do it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching. If you're on YouTube and you don't like YouTube, you can always check it out on audio platforms. Spotify does make us do video now, though, so you can watch it there if you'd like. Otherwise, our supporters can come in here and watch it live on Space Tomato on our Patreon and Twitch. And also our Space Tomato 2 now. People have been asking how to support that. And you can actually join as a member over there, and you get early access to the podcast if it's not live at that time. Either way, thank you, everybody, for checking this out. Thank you more for joining me. We'll see you all.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Sorry. I didn't say that yet. I have to say thank you so much for having me. And I'm not even joking. Like, hit the subscribe button and the follow button or whatever it is on the podcast platform.
Do it.
This
Smash
guy's
it.
awesome.
Thank you
Smash
again,
it.
man. Appreciate you. Y'all have a good week. I'll see you in the next one.